Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Fight Song Sports Podcast. As always, my name is Ty Hansen. Joining me today, Bryson Lewis. Bryson, we finally got the Final Four in the national championship out of the way for the NCAA tournament. An exciting 3 games there that really, I think, had all of the college sports world focused in on all 3 games. They're really good. Kansas ends up taking home the trophy, beating UNC in the national championship. What were your thoughts on how the tournament ended up shaking out?
I think it was a pretty good Final Four. We saw Kansas just kind of keep Villanova arm's length in the semifinal, and then UNC Duke went down to the wire there. Coach K and the Blue Devils go down, Coach K's last game. And then the championship game was I think it was just a phenomenal game. Kind of remnants of the Baylor game for UNC again, get out to an early lead, 15 at halftime, and just couldn't close it out at the end of the half this time, or at the end of the second half this time, despite getting a freak chance. Kansas player steps out of bounds with 4 seconds left, and I think the play was designed for Brady Manick. He was trying to come around over the top, I think, and he just slipped. And it seemed to be an issue for North Carolina all night. The floor was, and their 6-man rotation kind of caught up to him, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Whenever they were on the floor, they almost looked unbeatable. And then they got tired and had to come off or got into foul trouble or something. And the guys that they brought in just, I think, panicked and just seemed really inexperienced and didn't have the composure for the big moment. But, going back to that UNC Duke game, seeing Coach K walk off the floor for the final time was obviously really sad. And seeing kind of his career stats and where they ended up, it's just incredible what he was able to do for 40 something years he was there. Obviously, knew he was a great coach and everything, and knew he was one of the best ever. And then, you see the wins and the Final Four trips and how many times he made the tournament and everything. And it's just that's good for an entire program. Just his career is good for the history of an entire program, let alone just for one coach to do it. It was incredible. But as a whole, I thought all 3 games were good. And I think that UNC team, man, if they had any sort of depth whatsoever, I think they were probably going to win it all. It was just the big leads. They were getting out to big leads and just couldn't hold it. You saw them blow it in the Baylor game. And then I think, was it 15 or 16 they led by at half?
15.
Yeah. And maybe I don't know if it was UNC or if it was Kansas, because we saw Kansas be really strong in the second half. They just dominated Miami, and I believe it was at the Elite 8 that they played Miami. And I think held Miami to something like 17 second half points, outscored them like 50-17 or something. And they pretty much just did the same thing. I wasn't able to watch the game just before halftime, and then into the first couple minutes into the second half, I just kind of checked my phone real quick before I turned it on, and I was like, "Whoa, that got out of it!" Kansas started turning it on real quick, and their second halves, I think, won them the national championship.
Yeah, I completely agree. They were unstoppable in almost every second half they played, outside of Creighton, really. And Creighton kind of took them down to the wire. But yeah, UNC, like you said, that 6-man rotation, Puff Johnson came in off the bench for them, and he played actually pretty well. But he ended up throwing up on the court. I think that was probably just a lack of conditioning. Hasn't really gotten minutes most of the season like that. And then for it to happen in the biggest game of his career. And obviously Armando Bacot rolled his ankle again. Caleb Love also rolled his ankle, and they just didn't have another big man for Bacot, really, was the main issue. And he was already playing hobbled going into the game. And then on Kansas's, not their last possession, but the last basket they got, Bacot wasn't on the floor, and Brady Manick was on David McCormick, and that is just never a recipe for success for UNC. And they went right at him and got 2 points and took the lead.
Yeah, and going back to it, they just didn't have the right matchups when their 6 weren't on the floor. It was those 5-6 that they had are better than almost probably anybody in the country. They were phenomenal. And they were a really good team. And looking back, when we put out that post of our, who we thought national champions, upset pick, bracket busters, I picked UNC as my bracket buster, and I had Kansas as my national champion, and then they end up facing each other in the in the national championship game, and fortunately got Kansas right. First time I've ever picked the national champion right, which was nice. And I had Houston there as my dark horse, and they were able to get into the Elite Eight, and I think should have beat Villanova in that game, but I mean, it was, I don't know. I felt like it was pretty cool seeing my bracket buster and my national champion, obviously making it all the way and picking it right for the first time ever. I've always had some unfortunate exits early with my national champion. So I was a little nervous. I was like, oh, this is like, I'm so close. And of course, they're going to lose, especially when I saw them down 15.5, but they pulled it out. I mean, they look good. And obviously first year coach there at UNC, you gotta expect them to be really strong again next year.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll see if they can kind of build on their strong finish of the season. Obviously they were a bubble team before the ACC tournament, really, or before that regular season finale at Duke. And the way they finished the season was just incredible. I don't think anyone really expected it. I think we both had them in the Sweet 16. But I don't think anyone expected them to make the national championship game. And kind of my last point on this, on the Final Four recap, was we need to just play basketball games in basketball arenas. I mean, Caleb Love rolls an ankle on the court, Baycott, the floor comes loose. That should not be happening in the biggest game of the year. And I mean, I'm not going to blame that solely on playing it in football stadiums every year, but because I mean, I don't think it's really ever happened like that. It's never really been that big of an issue. But they're splitting these floors like 2 days before the Final Four semifinal games. And I just don't really think it's best for the players. I don't think it's going to change anything because there's too much money involved. But that was just kind of
depth perception too. I mean, basketball arenas aren't that open and that big, obviously. I mean, it's got to be weird having the basket just kind of out there in the middle of a massive arena, with, I mean, obviously they're out in the middle in a basketball arena too, but it's a little bit different because the walls of the stadium aren't so far back. It's just got to be weird for them at shooting wise. But I agree. I mean, there's plenty of NBA arenas. I mean, Madison Square Garden, you can't have it there. You got the Staples Center if you're to have it there, which I guess isn't the Staples Center anymore. But yeah, I agree. It's just for all those things combined. You play basketball in a basketball arena. It would be like having the football, the national championship for football at like Wrigley Field or something. Like that just wouldn't make any sense, and it's just not built for that. Yeah, it's cool for maybe some bowl games or to have some a basketball tournament that at one point they played on the Navy ship, the Carrier. Those are cool things to do, but in the most important games, you gotta have the right atmosphere. Obviously not just for the fans, but also for the players, most importantly.
Yeah, I completely agree. So we'll just look forward to the offseason now. A lot of transfer portal stuff for college basketball as a whole. Murray State's entire team is in the portal. LSU is in a very similar spot. Obviously, two programs. LSU hiring the Murray State head coach and Murray State losing their head coach. But we'll keep it with basketball for now. We'll talk about Oklahoma and Nebraska here. They both got some interesting stuff going on, but we'll start with Oklahoma. And they lose assistant head coach David Patrick to Sacramento State. He takes the head coaching job there. Obviously, only 1 year at Oklahoma under Porter Moser. I don't think that was originally the plan. He was associate head coach at Arkansas under Eric Musselman, and they took him a big hire for them. He's an international guy. I believe he's from the Caribbean or somewhere like that. And it's a big loss. They're going to have to fill an assistant coaching role after Porter Moser's first season. And like I said, he's their international guy. You got to wonder if maybe Benny Schroeder takes a look around, tries to get out of his NIL. He's an assistant coach, so OU doesn't necessarily have to let him out, but you just never know. And then we've obviously talked about A.K. Moyne possibly entering the portal, and he's another international guy that's on the roster. And you just got to wonder if that further pushes and maybe he follows Patrick out to Sacramento State, because I don't think he's really going to see minutes at the Power 5 level.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you lose any part of your coaching staff, it's never a great thing. But also at the same time, you have to understand that, when you have assistant coaches, You don't have career long assistant coaches. I mean, their job is to get a head coaching job. And when they get one they want to take, whether that's after the head coach's first season or they've been there for 30 years, it's going to happen. And when they get the right job, that's part of the business. But you also see, especially nowadays, when coaches leave, players follow them. So you never know what could happen there.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, AK Mine was a guy that we talked about last time, probably already headed for the portal. Got to think this solidifies that. But they do keep KT Turner as an assistant coach. He was rumored to be looked at for the Louisville assistant coach job, but they have focused on Duke assistant Nolan Smith. So he's going to stay, and that's big. They can keep Miles Uzon in the recruiting class, but they do lose Alston Mason to the portal. Excuse me. He was a freshman point guard out of Kansas City area. Porter Moser's first offer at the very end of last cycle after he took the Oklahoma job, and he's a guy kind of undersized a little bit. Played some minutes early in the season, particularly in the preseason tournament, but after we got to conference play, really didn't see a lot of playing time outside of when Bijan Cortez was out injured for 2 or 3 games. So I don't want to say it's not a loss. It's certainly not a huge loss. OU was probably already going to the portal for another guard. Probably wouldn't have factored in much again next year. But it is one of Porter's first recruited guys, albeit it was like 2 weeks. But it is certainly a loss, although not a big one.
Yeah, for sure. You never know what guys could turn out to be, especially early in any sport at any level. The guys that you typically don't play are going to find somewhere else to go. It's just part of the nature of college sports, and no one wants to be stuck on a team where you're not going to play much. And with the head coach leaving, an assistant coach leaving, maybe another one that follows.
Yeah, absolutely. And other than that, not really a lot going on the men's side. They're just really focusing on the portal now. No real information out there other than tweets from guys like John Rothstein saying X players heard from Oklahoma, blah, blah, blah. No top lists, no commitments, anything like that so far. But we'll keep an eye on that. And as for the women's side, I can confirm Taylor Robertson and Maddie Williams are using their COVID year to return to Oklahoma. That was something I was pretty sure of last time, but that's been confirmed. And Jenny Bronchek has been named the World Exposure Report Coach of the Year. I don't really know what the World Exposure Report is. They've got like 17,000 followers on Twitter, but I mean, she obviously did a phenomenal job as a 4 seed in the tournament, despite the bitter end of the season. So that's always good to see. Another really good hire from Porter Moser, and look to build on it next year. And they were named to the way too early ESPN Top 25, coming in at number 10, which is obviously pretty eye-opening. But anytime you bring back girls like Taylor Robertson and Maddie Williams, you got to be expected to do big things.
Yeah, experience means a lot, for sure. Anytime, COVID has just screwed everything up and there's people taking 5th, 6th, 7th years. And anytime you can get that experience, I mean, 5th year seniors are what, 22, 23 years old. That's a lot different than playing an 18-year-old freshman. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
and go ahead.
Wrap up.
I was just going to say on that 5th, 6th year senior, that's another thing. The men's side, Mo Gibson will be 24. I think that might be a reason he probably does end up just taking the pro route. No official decision there yet. But yeah, I mean, you're getting players that are 24, 25 years old, and they're playing against 18, 19-year-olds. So
yeah. So we'll jump on over to Nebraska, and just staying on that line of the 5th year eligibility. Big news that Derek Walker will return to the Huskers. He was the only player to play in all 32 games this year. Started all of them. Obviously a former transfer from Tennessee. This upcoming season will be his 3rd season at Nebraska. That we weren't really sure what his decision was going to be. Obviously now he is returning. That is really big, especially for a team that is already losing a lot. It was a big one to bring back. And then another big addition, Adam Howard comes in as our assistant coach. I don't really know much about him. He's coming from South Alabama. He's had some assistant coaching spots at Troy, Tennessee, Southern Miss, and Morehead State. He played at Western Kentucky, and in 2008, he made the Sweet 16 with them. As I mentioned, I don't really know much about him. I don't study the assistant coaches at South Alabama too much. But obviously, Fred Hoiberg thought highly of him and enough to bring him onto the squad. And hopefully he's is a key piece in starting to turn this thing around.
Yeah, absolutely. And on Walker, I mean, bringing a guy like him back, 5th year, big guy, 6'9", averaging like 9 points last year and like 6 rebounds. You expect him to take another step, and maybe he's a guy that can step into more of a prominent scoring role for you guys. And obviously not much on the South Alabama assist coming in, but I think you got to trust Fred Hoiberg, given his history, albeit Nebraska hasn't been super good so far, but you got to think he's really working hard this offseason because he knows he's probably only got 1 more year if he doesn't start turning it around.
You would think so. I mean, I think he was blessed to get this this coming year, next year, whatever you want to say. I think he was really lucky to get that year. And I don't see a future past that if things go wrong. But back to the current team, they're hosting Antonio Reeves, who is in the transfer portal from Illinois State. Obviously not a big name program, but don't get it wrong. This guy's a high profile transfer. He's already heard from schools like Duke, North Carolina, Kentucky, Texas Tech, Wisconsin, Ohio State, and others. He's visiting Nebraska this weekend. It would be a really big one to get. He will have 2 seasons left wherever he chooses to go. And, if you're visiting, you got to imagine that's got to be in your short list of schools you're really thinking about. And, when you're comparing, to Duke, North Carolina, Kentucky, Texas Tech, those are all high profile top 10 teams in the country. I think it would be a huge get for Nebraska if they were able to pull that one in, especially with losing Bryce McGowens.
Yeah, absolutely. Going to be looking for somebody to really fill that scoring role. And he's a guy that averaged 20 points last year, albeit for Illinois State. I mean, that's still very, very impressive at the college level. And I think that's definitely going to be a selling point for the Nebraska coaching staff. You can come and be the guy here. And I mean, I wouldn't want to throw him into the first round draft pick conversation that McGowens is in, but you can be like, look at the guy that we had last year that was really doing everything for us. You can come be that, fill that exact same role.
Yeah, I totally agree. You're not really fighting for much. I mean, the door is open for anybody. I mean, there are no guaranteed starters for next season with the way the past couple have gone. And, you can go to those big name programs and it might look good in the Instagram bio, but, you might not play a ton, especially when those schools are bringing in the top 10, 15, high school recruits every single season. And you got one and done guys. I mean, they just go to college because they have to. You might get lost in those programs. And if you go to Nebraska, you can stand out and you're going to have the ball in your hands. And obviously you never know what can happen. And, you obviously put up 20 points a game at Illinois State, for able to do something similar in the Big Ten. That means a lot.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's kind of something that reminds me of a transfer last year out of Drake, Joseph Yesufu, who transferred to Kansas. And I mean, he averaged like 12, 13 points a game, I believe, at Drake his freshman year. And he transferred to Kansas and really did not see a bunch of time this year. And obviously that's the national champion team. And I think he's still got 2 or 3 more years of eligibility. But he just dropped 20 a game this last season. You got to think he's going somewhere where he knows he's going to start.
I would think so. I wouldn't want to go dropping 20 points a game and then go somewhere where you're not going to play much and drop like 3 or 4. The door's wide open at Nebraska, wide open. So you might not win a ton, but you'll get the ball. And it depends. Some kids I feel like might say, hey, I'll sacrifice the playing time for a chance to win a national title. But there are also some kids that say, I don't really care. Let me get mine and see if I can make the NBA or something. Or get a pro contract overseas. we'll just have to see what happens there.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll just kind of keep an eye on the portal for all three of those programs, and we'll kind of transition over to baseball here. And it was an interesting week for OU baseball. Started on Tuesday, and they beat Oklahoma State 7-6. They scored 2 in the ninth to win. Walk off, bases loaded walk. Not the most exciting way to win, but it's a win over a top 10 team in the country. And you did give up 6, but I mean, at the end of the day, you pulled it out against a top 10 team, and you can never complain about that.
Yeah, I don't think you can be upset with giving up 6 to Oklahoma State. Obviously, top 10 team in the country. You can give up 6 runs and win, obviously, like they were able to. And I mean, it's just not giving up. It's just not folding, especially against your in-state rival, who really is kind of the big brother for baseball in the state. That's a big win, and it was a non-conference win because it was in Tulsa at the Tulsa Driller Stadium, and does not count towards Big 12 play. But just something cool they do every year. They always play that non-conference game and usually kind of mix it up, whether it be in Oklahoma City or Tulsa. Something I definitely like about that series. But down 5-6 in the ninth, and that game just means a little bit more, and you're able to put some pressure on Oklahoma State, and they end up folding, and you walk out of there with a win.
Yeah, absolutely. And then they turn their attention to Texas, another top 10 team in the country, over the weekend. And they drop the first game. They win the second game. They're playing at Globe Life in Arlington. It was supposed to be a home series, and you got to think they would have liked to have some home field advantage in the third game. Not really sure why they wanted to take the money instead of just play it at home. I guess it's a cool opportunity, but in the third game, you're leading 7-1 going into the seventh inning, and I mean, you got to think, okay, we've got this thing wrapped up. And then just kind of the same thing. Bullpen play is not good. They give up 6 in the seventh inning, and all of a sudden it's tied 7-7, and they go on to lose 12-8. And it's just that exact same story. I feel like every time we get on the podcast to talk about OU baseball, there's at least one game where they've given up a massive inning.
Yeah, for sure. The Globe Life thing, obviously cool. Anytime you get to play in a major league ballpark as a college kid, you got to love it. But that's like the third or fourth weekend that they've played down there. I know they were in Houston once as well. Yeah, I don't hate the decision to play Texas there. I mean, obviously OU Texas for football is in the Cotton Bowl in Dallas every year. I would love to see that baseball series be played in Arlington at Globe Life every year. I think that would be awesome. But I agree. I mean, anytime you get to play at home, it's a huge advantage. And I don't understand it. The fact that you've played there, multiple times this season, just seems a little weird. But it's the same story. It's the big numbers out of the bullpen. I mean, you're up 7-1 with 9 outs to play. I mean, man, that's oof. You're not up 2 or 3 and need to lock down at your bullpen. I mean, you got some room to work with, and I mean, you give up 11 runs with 9 outs to play. Like, I mean, that's not very good. And it's the same, it's the same story as you just said. It's the big numbers. I mean, they're not giving up 1 or 2 runs a lot. They're giving up 6, 7 runs in an inning, and it's one inning that beats them every game. They got to figure it out because, teams that can swing it, especially like Texas, Texas has been a little down as of late. They look, they were the undoubted number 1 earlier this season. They've been down a little bit. But anytime you're playing one of the best teams in the country, those big innings are going to kill you. You can't let that happen. I mean, you're really just handing them a win because teams that can swing it like that are going to capitalize and they're going to use the most. They're going to get the most out of their outs and let big innings happen often. But it's just the same story. And they're finding a way to lose games instead of winning them.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously you would have liked to take that Texas series, but I mean, on the bright side, I guess they do go 2-2 against 2 top 10 teams, and you can't really complain. Your previous record against top 25 teams hasn't been that good this season, so you'll always take it, I guess. But they've got ORU tonight at home, and then they've got a series at Oklahoma State this weekend. Another weekend where they've got 0-4 potential written all over it here. They're already in action against ORU tonight. They're up 3-0 early, but we know how that goes watching this team against an ORU team that's traditionally pretty solid at baseball.
Yeah. Yeah, Oral Roberts is no joke up there in Tulsa. Summit League, not the best conference in college baseball, but they seem to win it every year and always give teams trouble in regionals. You see them as a 4 seed every time, and they've got something like 40 wins, like 40-12 headed into regionals. Always a good team, and especially in state, ORU they're going to want to beat. They're going to want to beat OU. I promise you that. That's a game you can't let slip, and then. Welcome to the Big 12. You get to lock it right back in again and play another ranked team in Oklahoma State. You were able to get them in a midweek, but didn't count towards conference. Maybe not the best guys going in that game. You're going to get Justin Campbell, especially at OSU, O'Brate Stadium. I don't know if you've been up there, but that place is just ridiculous. Probably one of the nicest in college baseball, and especially against OU for Bedlam. That's going to be a hostile environment. They take it serious up there in Stillwater, and you'd love to win a series at OSU. If you could go up there to Stillwater and take a series, just even 2-1, that would be huge for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And it'll all be all about pitching and defense for them. Another note on that Texas game, they overran 2 fly balls, and on another instance, had center fielder and left fielder run into each other.
Yeah.
And it's just been mental mistakes like that all season. From Oklahoma, even on the offensive side, base running has been poor. Guys getting picked off, not every game, but pretty frequently, which is just not something that you can ever do. You can't leave guys on base getting picked off like that. It's just kind of a big picture thing that in Skip Johnson's 5th year really should not be happening. And especially on the defense side of things, Skip Johnson is a pitching guy, former pitching coach, and the bullpen has been horrendous all year. They've obviously got Jake Bennett, who's a very good starter, usually their first game of the series starter on Thursdays and Fridays. But outside of that, the pitching has just not been particularly good.
Yeah. Obviously Skip Johnson, a huge pitching guy. He's been there for a while. And the history of OU head baseball coaches has been interesting. You had Sonny Galloway a while back, and then Pete Hughes, I believe, but between him and Skip Johnson, who obviously is now at Kansas State. When you got a pitching coach as your head coach, that's got to be your identity. And it just hasn't been the case. They've had great pitchers in the past. Cade Cavalli, drafted to the Nationals just recently, a couple of years ago. And they've even had some high school kids committed that hadn't made it. Both on pitching and in the field. But yeah, as a pitching coach, you got to win games by pitching, and it's not happening right now. But Jake Bennett has been a huge bright spot for that team. Right now he's got a 2.09 ERA, and that's against phenomenal competition. He's all over the draft boards, guys loving him. He went toe to toe with Pete Hansen out of Texas, and obviously took the loss, but in a major league stadium against Texas, there's going to be scouts there and people are going to watch, and people are like when they're seeing, and I think he has to unfortunately take a large amount of the innings in his starts if they're going to win games. It's got to be frustrating for him knowing that, if you come out of the game and it's 3-1, you've done your job, but it might not be over. You might be walking out with a no decision. Or even, you lead by 1 or 2 and you walk out with, 2 of your guys on base and those runners count for you. That's not a very fun feeling when a reliever comes in and gives up the runs that count towards your stat line. You got to ride him. I think if you're Skip Johnson, he's given you, 6-7 solid innings, and maybe you run him out there for one more inning that, you typically wouldn't.
Yeah, absolutely. And they are 16-10 overall going into the ORU game tonight. And just kind of back on Skip Johnson, I don't want to say he's on the hot seat, but you got to think if they don't make the postseason, he's probably out of there. It's his 5th year. They were kind of a contenders first year, 2018, for their regional. Kyler Murray, and I'm blanking on Steele. What was his first name?
Steele
Walker, last
Walker.
name. Yeah, obviously very good team. And then Kyler Murray doesn't play in the regional; he's hurt. But it's just kind of regressed from there outside of 2020 when they had that phenomenal pitching staff. Um, and you got to think if they go in as a 4 seed and go 0-2 in a regional, they're out, or Skip Johnson's out, excuse me. Or if they don't make the postseason, he's out.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because the amount of draft talent that's gone through there in recent years is just incredible. And the guys that haven't made it there, I mean, Ed Howard comes to mind. I mean, getting ready to make his major league debut on Thursday, Bobby Witt, obviously an Oklahoma commit, doesn't make it. That hurts a lot, and that's something that you have to deal with in baseball that you don't have to deal with in other sports. If it was football, if you had football rules, those guys make it on campus, and you got them for 3 years. Might be a lot of changes and a different team if those guys make it on campus. I think it's interesting because they've had so much talent, but haven't been able to do a lot with it. And that's kind of where it's like, man, I mean, what do you do? But I mean, they've had some serious dudes in there the past, 5 years since he's been there, and all over draft boards in the first couple rounds as well. That makes you wonder. I mean, what do you value? Do you think he's going to change and be able to get the most out of that talent, or if you do decide to get rid of him and move on, is that talent still going to be coming in? Because it could always get worse. I think it's interesting for sure. Right now, Ben Upton, the host of the 11.7 podcast, big college baseball podcast, has it penciled in right now as a 3 seed in the Knoxville Regional, which they are the #1 overall national seed as of right now. That is not a place you want to go. Tennessee is a tough environment to play and a very, very, very good team. They are not only lighting it up with the bats, but also on the mound right now. Probably I say early, we're about halfway through the season now. Favorites to win it all. If obviously, in terms of talking about postseason, it is early. But if OU was to make it there, man, that's a tough draw.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime you got to go play regional in the SEC, it's going to be a very, very difficult time.
Yeah, for sure. And kind of moving it over into Nebraska. Nebraska had to do that last year. Went to #1 overall seed Arkansas as a 2 seed and had a really tough regional there. A lot of people thought they probably could have got a 1, end up getting a 2. Not only do you get a 2, but you go to the toughest place to play. And that was a phenomenal regional. But, talking about this season, it's been, pretty disappointing so far, but maybe start to turn things around. Last week, we talked about that midweek game that was going on while we recorded, and they ended up losing that game 3-2. It's just really frustrating. They had a lot of chances late and just couldn't capitalize. Runners on third with less than 2 outs and just couldn't get them in. I mean, couldn't tie it up. Creighton, obviously a solid program year in and year out, but they should be, those are games they've got to win, especially to an in-state rival. You got to win it. And now that, they're probably going to have to win the Big Ten to get in. I mean, those are the games that kind of make or break your at-large hopes. But headed into last weekend after the Creighton midweek, they played Ohio State and were able to sweep them, get a 3-game sweep there. They needed it. They have had a rough start to the season, and to go out and get 3 in Big Ten play over Ohio State, just massive. They played great baseball around. The bats were there. The pitching was there. I believe gave up 5 and 3, I think, in terms of runs, and I believe put up like 17 and 10 in 2 of the games. It was all around good baseball. I mean, that wins you games. You can give up 5 runs and still win. And obviously, if you're scoring 17 in a game, you're hoping to win that one too. But we've seen them give up like 22 or whatever it was to Corpus Christi. So this team, it's never guaranteed. Tomorrow night, Wednesday, they're at UNO, Nebraska Omaha for a midweek. It's an important game to keep the morale going because they've got another big series this weekend against Rutgers. Rutgers 22-6, 4-1 in the Big Ten. They're all over the NCAA leaders right now for batting average and all sorts of offensive categories. But with that being said, they also have played a little bit of a weaker schedule. If you look at their midweeks, obviously they're up there in New Jersey. You don't have the best baseball up there, but they've played some weaker teams. So that 22-6, I think you got to take it with a grain of salt at this moment in time. But definitely probably at right now the best team in the Big Ten, and it would be huge to walk out with the series win.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, they're probably gonna have to end up winning the Big Ten if they want to make the postseason. They're 12-14 right now. Just really not the start to the season they envisioned. But you get a series at home against Rutgers. If you can take that and beat New Orleans midweek, maybe things start coming around to you. Rutgers is, like you said, the best team in the Big Ten right now, and a series win against that can do wonders for you.
Yeah, and I think it would, continuing that, sort of streak they're on right now. I mean, 3 games feels like an eternity for them right now. I mean, it feels like they haven't lost in forever because they haven't been winning that much. So you pick up a midweek win and then able to get, hopefully 2 out of 3 or even a sweep there, would just keep this team rolling, and they've got to turn it around real quick. I think at-large bids are probably out of the question, unless they get really, really hot. But I think at-large bids probably out of the question, and you got to win the Big Ten, which, not an easy task to do when, you sit halfway through the season and you're a team that, your expectation was to host a regional this year, and you've got a sub 500 record pretty much halfway through the season, and the only way you got to get in is win the Big Ten. I mean, that's a tough task for any team.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's never a position you want to put yourself in. But we'll go ahead and switch it over to golf now. And kind of another disappointing weekend for the OU men. They finished 4th at the Calusa Cup behind Georgia Tech, Florida, Wake Forest, 3 top 15, top 25 teams in the country. And they were missing Logan McAllister, who was at the Valero Texas Open this last weekend. He missed the cut by 1 shot, finishing at even par after the first 2 rounds. But OU didn't have a golfer under par this week. I think there were only 8 total under par. So, I mean, not a huge deal. But if you don't have 1 under par, you're probably not really competing. And Patrick Welch finished at tied 11th. Chris Goddard tied 16th. Drew Goodman 18th. And Ben Lorenz at tied 19th. I mean, not horrible, not great. That's 4th place out of 9. They got 4th place at the NIT out of 15 teams last week. So maybe struggling a little bit here down the stretch. But sometimes in golf that happens.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to be great every single weekend you come out in golf. But especially with missing one of your top 3 players, Logan McAllister. And I mean, you saw what he was able to do. I mean, he shoots even par in a PGA Tour event. Not many people can say they do that, let alone do it while you're in college. Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any reason to panic. It's not like they've gone from, winning every tournament to now in the, bottom couple schools. I mean, you finished 4th, and you got 4 guys inside the top 25. I don't think panic just yet. Especially missing, one of your best guys who was playing in a PGA Tour event. So I don't think you panic. And I mean, just Logan McAllister, even par, at the Valero Texas Open down there in San Antonio. You just got to laugh. I mean, he had to have been telling his professors, "Hey, I'm not going to be in class on Thursday and Friday, or even pretty much all week. Yeah, I'm going to play in a PGA Tour event," which is one of the cool things about college golf is you get to play in the professional tournaments as an amateur, in college. I mean, that'd be like, if a football player going to play in the NFL for 1 week, just one of the cool things about golf. But, I don't see any reason to panic for this team yet. I mean, they're fine. They're playing well. Still the best team in the country. They're loaded and are probably still the pick to win it all, come later down the season.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're going to finish up the regular season in 2 weekends at the Thunderbird Collegiate in Tempe, Arizona, hosted by Arizona State. Some very good teams will be out there. Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, UNC, all three of those top 10 teams, and then Arizona State also ranked. On the women's side of things, they went to the Red Raider match play hosted by Texas Tech this last weekend. They go 0-3. Obviously, a match play event. They lost to Texas Tech, Tulsa, and Oklahoma State. Every match finished 2-3 in favor of the opposing teams. Another not great showing. You never want to go 0-3 in match play.
No, I mean, you're playing good schools there for sure, but you never want to go 0-3. I mean, it's golf. It's tough to beat good schools like that, but you never want to walk out of there without a win.
Yeah, absolutely. And they will turn their attention to the Bruzzy tournament. I believe it's hosted by the University of North Texas. There was a decent field last year, but that's about all I could find out on it. That's coming up this weekend, I believe. No announced field that I could find, but they'll look to get it turned around.
Yeah, for sure. And then in terms of Nebraska golf, they both have not played since we last covered them. The men play this weekend, I believe, out in North Carolina, I think hosted by NC State. I could be wrong there. But yeah, they just have been inactive since then. So
yeah, so we'll go ahead and throw it over to the softball side now. And OU softball just continues their dominant run. They run rural Wichita State, I believe 11-1 was the final there, and then go 2-0 against UAB. They run rule in the first game, and then the second game they went 2-0. Goes down to the wire a little bit. They score both runs in the sixth inning, and they just continue to show they could win really any way they want to, whether that's offensively, defensively. They just continue to be really good.
Yeah, and they're winning close games too, for sure. I mean, they're blowing out most of their games, but when it's close, they're not panicking and they're finding a way to win late. Yeah, they're obviously really good. It's the quick segment on this podcast. Yep, still undefeated, still kicking the tar at everybody else. It's run rule every single week, followed by one close game in which they score late and win. And I mean, you won 2-0. You can't win scoring 0 runs. So your pitching staff is obviously doing their job as well. 2 runs likely won't win you a lot of games, but you can't win at all if you score 0. So, I mean, yeah, as you said, they're getting it done whatever way they want to.
Yeah, absolutely. And they are 32-0 now. They've got a midweek game against Tulsa at home this week on Wednesday, and then they will go down to Lubbock to play Texas Tech over the weekend in a Big 12 series. But we'll go ahead and throw it over to Nebraska, and they're a team that's hot as well.
Yeah, they're rolling right now. They're up to 25-9. They swept Rutgers and beat Creighton in a midweek. They're on a 10-game win streak right now, 3 of those being run rules. They got it rolling right now. Probably one of the hottest teams in the country. Obviously not as hot as OU. Their win streak is only 22 games behind theirs. But I mean, anytime you can bust out a 10-game win streak in the middle of your season, you've got to be happy about that. They're at Michigan State this weekend, which I would think they would be able to at least get out of that series 2-1, and come home with a series win. They're not ranked right now, but at 25-9, you got to imagine they're probably on that line, getting in soon, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And they'll continue to look to keep rolling here. Obviously super impressive. 500 team last year and to be 25-9 now, and probably squarely in the NCAA tournament right now. Maybe potentially hosting a regional. We'll have to see how they finish out the season here. But we'll throw it over to football now. And OU continuing spring practice here. No major injuries to anyone so far that we've heard about, but they do welcome back Justin Harrington to the program. Some OU fans might remember him. Before the 2020 season, he was getting a lot of praise. Only practiced once, but 7-on-7 before practice to start. A lot of people thought he would come in and take a job. Big guy, 6'3", 200, 210, and can really, really run. I believe his mom was an Olympic sprinter, or at least a collegiate sprinter, if she was not Olympic. But he was a former top JUCO safety prospect in the entire country. When he got to OU in 2020, he had an injury from his junior college school and ended up missing the entire 2020 season, and came back in 2021. I think a lot of people expected him to play, really never played. I think he got in on special teams in the spring game and then just never featured in any game during the season. And about halfway through, decided to enter the portal, look around, and really never received any interest from anyone in the portal. And Brent Venables, I think, just kind of keeping his clean slate policy with OU, decides to welcome him back. I believe he's a walk-on. And, he hasn't done anything football related since the middle of the 2021 season. There was some video of him from practice. He looks like he's in great shape. I don't really think he's going to factor in too much. I believe he's only got 1 year left of eligibility. I don't know. I mean, we'll see if he gets on the field in any capacity. I think it's probably a win for OU. But yeah, they've got some early standouts in spring practice. One on offense and one on defense. I'll throw you here is Jalil Farooq. He was leading receiver in the Alamo Bowl against Oregon, true freshman last year. Came into OU, probably package deal with Caleb Williams from the same general area. And I think a lot of people kind of expected him to just follow Caleb Williams and Lincoln Riley when they left. And that was something he really wasn't interested in, never even entered the portal. And he's really lighting up spring practice right now. Everybody's giving him good publicity. And then on the defensive side, Louisville transfer Kenai Walker, I believe is how you pronounce his name. Big guy, long, super fast. And there's been some videos on Twitter. A Jalil Farooq catch actually was posted yesterday, I believe. And it looked like it was one-on-ones, one offense versus one defense, I mean. And he seemed to be the opposite DB of Woody Washington. But he's a guy that I think everybody's kind of hearing the same buzz about. He's really lighting it up, and I believe he'll be a redshirt freshman this year. And that'll be a guy that Brent Venables and co can really develop.
Yeah, and what have they announced their spring game date yet?
April 23rd.
Okay, so a little bit later, I feel like, than normal.
Yeah, I
I'm
think
sure
it was around the same time last year, but usually it would be this coming weekend in most years.
Yeah,
because it's almost always with the Masters.
Yeah, Nebraska's is on Saturday, April 9th, which the 23rd seems, later than usual, but that obviously might be, new coaching staff and everything. You'll take those 2 weeks to, get a little bit more acclimated, get some more time under your belt. And I mean, it's just kind of, it's going to be a huge kind of reset for Oklahoma. There's going to be no, so-and-so did this, so-and-so did that last year. I mean, it's clean slate for everybody, and, lot going out, a lot coming in, completely different. And, I think it's open to anybody. I don't think it matters, who you are, where you're coming from, what you did in the past. Just show up and win it right now, because it's everybody's new here. So, I mean, this is a brand new team, and show up and go win a job.
Yeah, absolutely. And Brent Venables said it at the beginning of spring ball. He said they were coming in with literally no depth chart. And I mean, some of that's probably true, obviously brand new coaching staff, but they've got an idea of who's there already. But anytime you've got a transfer coming in who was a freshman at Louisville last year, and he's kind of slotting in with the ones and twos already, and a guy with his athleticism is a big, big win for Oklahoma. But we'll throw it over to Nebraska. And like you said, they've got the spring game coming up this weekend.
Yeah. So, conveniently with the Masters, April 9th, the spring game on Saturday. And, I've seen a lot on Twitter and just throughout social media of, so-and-so looks good. So-and-so's done this. So-and-so's going to have this role. I'm not really buying into it a whole lot yet. It's early. It's a spring game. We see it every year. And then, a receiver will, so-and-so will look good and we'll have a big role this year, and then goes out and catches 5 passes during the season. I'm not real big into it just yet. Obviously I'm going to drink the Kool-Aid like many other Nebraska fans. But I'm just trying to stay humble, and, we got a lot of transfers coming in, pretty much a whole new offensive coaching staff. it's going to be a different look on Saturday than what we've seen in the past. Obviously, moving on from the Martinez era, it's gonna feel weird without him at quarterback for sure. He's kind of become the identity of this team, whether that be good or bad. And now we're moving on from that. I think it might be a good thing for sure. But I'm not buying into the whole, so-and-so has done this or coach is doing this. We'll see what shows up in October or August and September in those first couple games. But we do have TCU transfer defensive end Ochan Mathis, I believe is how you say that. Ochan. He will visit on the spring game, so April 9th. He has been kind of rumored to Nebraska, talking to Nebraska for quite a while now. I believe we talked about him transferring in, a couple months ago now. It's been a while. So he's finally visiting. And with a defensive line this year that will likely be one of the weaker points of this team, we'll have to see if they step up. If we're able to bring him in, that would be very, very, very good, because we're losing a lot on defense, and anybody we can get coming in will be huge for us.
Yeah. O'Shawn Mathis, obviously TCU transfer, decided to transfer out after Gary Patterson left. I think a lot of people just kind of expected him to follow Gary down to Texas. He's now in a off the field role for them. But this is a guy, as an OU fan, I'm very familiar with. 2020, he really, really lit it up. He had 9 sacks. This guy's a phenomenal player. I think even potential first-round draft pick in the future. He only had 4 sacks in 2021, so basically cut his production in half. But anytime you're coming off a year where you have 9 sacks, you're going to get a lot more attention. He's a phenomenal player, and if Nebraska can somehow pull him in, that's a guy that, looking ahead, I think could give OU a ton of trouble. Their offensive line isn't set in stone by any means, but he's the guy that could wreck the Big Ten.
Yeah, I hope so. Going back to the obviously the good old years for Nebraska, but even back in the late 2000s and early 2010s, Ndamukong Suh, Jared Crick, the list can go on and on and on. Randy Gregory. Defensive line has been a big part of Nebraska football's identity in the black shirts, and seeing that be a weak spot for this Nebraska football team this year kind of concerns me. And if he's able to come in and be a leader on that defensive line, I think it will be huge for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll obviously have eyes on the spring game there this weekend, but we'll kind of throw it over to the Masters now. Kind of a big deal, and there's obviously kind of a big player that might be making his first appearance in a professional tournament again this week.
Yeah, so we had the bombshell dropped earlier today that Tiger will play this week at the Masters. It's obviously been rumored ever since he played with Charlie in the father-son challenge. It was kind of like, hey, when's the return date going to be? And he really kind of, during that had made it seem like it was further out than April. But last week flew to Augusta with Charlie and JT and played a practice round, flew back. And then obviously now back at Augusta again. And has been practicing all week. Seen him on TV, looks great. And then in an interview press conference today, not only said that he will be playing, but also said that he feels confident that he could win.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think kind of everybody expects Tiger to say he thinks he can win. Obviously, he's not going to go there and say, I just hope I make the cut. He's Tiger Woods. He's coming back from a near fatal car accident. Yeah. I think it's really incredible that he's actually playing. It'll be good if he can make the cut. We'll see. From all accounts, he's looked good out there. But actually going out there and doing it is a completely different thing.
Yeah, it is. It's tough. And obviously it's Masters. It's not like he's rolling up to, just a regular PGA Tour event. He's going to probably, what many consider the best event all year. But also a place he knows really well. What does he have? Is it 5 green jackets, I believe? Yep. Looking for his 6th. And obviously a recent winner, won in 2019 when nobody thought he could. Realistically, logically, you say, yeah, I hope he makes the cut. But his name is also Tiger Woods, and there's a damn good shot he could go out and win by like 10 shots.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he tees off at 9:34 on Thursday, and luckily, my 10:30 class is not meeting Tuesday or Thursday this week, so I will be glued to the television, like I think everybody else will that follows golf.
Yeah.
But we'll kind of turn to our predictions. And who do you have winning this weekend?
Yeah, I've got Patrick Cantlay winning this weekend. He's been solid all year. He doesn't have a win yet. Couple of top tens, I think 4, I want to say, and is in the 20s, I believe, on the earnings list this year. Just a kind of guy that I think, won't get too fired up and won't get too low. Is going to stay level headed, and I think it's going to pay off at Augusta.
Yeah, Patrick Cantlay, I think there's several people out there that are kind of picking him, maybe kind of an under the radar guy. I mean, doesn't have a major, certainly not considered up there with the biggest names, but he's played really, really solid all year. And I definitely think he's a guy that's going to compete this weekend. I've got Justin Thomas taking it this weekend. He's been playing really, really well recently. 3 top tens in his last 4 tournaments, and obviously he's a guy, he knows Augusta, and he's out there playing with Tiger in the practice rounds this weekend. But I mean, there's probably 4 or 5 guys off the top of my head that could win this weekend.
For sure. That's the beauty of golf is, there might be a favorite, but, they could go out and not even make the cut. And especially at Augusta. We've seen some pretty random winners in the past. Danny Willett winning it and really hasn't done anything since then. And, you can go back even into the, 2000s, 90s, 80s and pick kind of the random winners, not just only at Augusta, but in the other majors as well. That's what golf's about. I mean, you can get hot for 4 days, find your way qualifying for the event and get hot for 4 days and win, even though you're, not even a top player.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another guy that could really win it this weekend is John Rahm. I don't think he's ever finished outside the top 10 at Augusta. Clearly knows how to play it very, very well. But guys like Cameron Smith, Scotty Scheffler, anyone, I mean, it's Augusta, anything can happen. But you got to think one of the 5 or 6 guys that we mentioned will probably end up in the winner's circle, or at least they might all be there on Sunday.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, the Masters is probably my favorite event or sporting event of the year. I know not college, but obviously professional golf. But March Madness and then the College World Series, for me, all kind of back to back are my probably 3 favorite all sporting events all year, and we get them right in a row. And you had the national championship wrap up last night, and then you turn around and on Thursday, just a couple days later, you got the Masters starting. You can't beat it.
Yeah, absolutely. Just an exciting time all around.
For sure. And lots to cover come every single week, especially with the spring games this weekend. Not just Nebraska's, but I'm sure lots of schools around the country, and a lot of visits too, because recruits will want to take visits on the spring games and see coaches and players in action. So
Yeah, absolutely. Just busy all around. And I mean, portal with basketball, spring games, recruiting, football, and then I mean the Masters, like you said, your favorite event, one of my favorite events, easily. And I mean, Tiger's out there, so can't complain with any of the sports going on right now.
for sure, definitely an exciting time. I think we say it every single week, but that'll go ahead and wrap us up here. Thank you guys for listening and watching. As always, you can follow us on our social media pages, just at Fight Song Sports, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, looking to get a little bit more active over there. And then as always, our weekly episodes, uploaded to SoundCloud and YouTube. We got playlists on both websites there. You can see all of our past episodes, as well as some of our featured athletes and guests that we've had on, and looking to get some more of those out. Stay tuned for possibly one later this week. So as always, thank you guys for listening. We appreciate it. And we'll see you next week.